No, Jake. Just a quick disclosure. Frickety frack. What is that word? Jesus Christ. No, don't say that. No. Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Heather and as always I'm reading with a vengeance and I hope you are too. As always, big love to you OGs who keep coming back, and if you're new to my channel, very warm welcome to you. And since I did my favorites of 2023, I have gotten kind of a rush of new subscribers, and I say thank you all so much for supporting my channel and welcome. I hope you love it here. I'd like to be able to tell you, yeah, you're gonna love it here. I keep it fresh, it's happening. Yeah, I don't, and it's not. I really just talk about the books that I read and why I love them or why I didn't. Well, here we are, first wrap-up of the year, first wrap-up of 2024. I'm here, of course, to talk about the books that I've read so far in the month of January. How has the year started? How has the year started? It's started pretty good, I think. I've read 7 books so far. I have had my first DNF of the year, but it's better. At least it wasn't the first book of the year. I believe 2023 or 2022, the very first book of the year was a DNF. That was not a great start, but it's nice to get it out of the way, right? I will say that I've started off the year with a pretty healthy mix of genres. I've had a sci-fi, a mystery, a nonfiction essay type book, translated fiction, my first dudelet. Yeah, it's just all over the place. So just a quick disclosure for the new folks, I don't give my books star ratings. I talk about what I do like about a book. I talk about what I don't like about a book. I talk about whether or not I would recommend it, who I might recommend it to. And while I don't rate them, I do rank them because the way I talk about them in my videos is I talk about them in the order of enjoyment. So I start off with books that I enjoyed the least and I lead up to the book that I enjoyed the most. So let's get into it. My first DNF of the year, it's kind of embarrassing. My first DNF of the year is America Fantastica by Tim O'Brien. This is marketed as contemporary literary fiction. This came out in October 2023, and in fact, and this is why it's embarrassing, I featured it in new releases that I'm excited to come out in October. I started off listening to this, but I did not like the narrator on this. I did not like the voice he gave Angie. I did not like the tone that he used just in the general narration, but I recognized that early on and I decided to give it a chance because I thought I don't want to DNF a book based on the narrator. So I continued on and it just ended up being too slow. The premise sounded really good. I thought this was going to be a really fun adventure story. It follows main character Boyd, who is a disgraced journalist, I guess, and he decides out of the blue in the summer of 2019 to rob a bank, and then he leaves taking the teller with him, Angie, and they go on this road trip of sorts. And Boyd knows he's going to be caught, but he has a couple of goals that he wants to complete before the authorities catch up to him. He wants to settle the score with a man who he believes ruined his life. I think he wants to make amends with some people in his past. But in the meantime, we're just kind of following him on this road trip with this kind of obnoxious bank teller who the narrator gave such a whiny voice, didn't do her any favors whatsoever. And I just thought it was going to be so much more fun than it ended up being. But it was very slow going. Not a whole lot happening. Dialogue between Boyd and Angie was just, I think it was meant to be entertaining banter, and it just ended up being annoying. So I just couldn't do it. So I put this one down. There's a big capital M maybe of trying the physical book at some point in the future. Maybe not a capital M, maybe a lowercase m. Yeah, this one didn't work out for me, unfortunately. Next is The Days at the Morisaki Bookshop by Satoshi Yagasawa. I read this book because this is the pick for our staff book club at work. This is Japanese literature, and oh, by the way, it is translated by Eric Ozawa. It's a teeny tiny little thing, and I got through it pretty quickly, I think like in 2 sittings. You'll notice I have some tabs here. I don't normally annotate my books, but because I'm going to be talking about it with my peers and coworkers, I wanted to just bring up some of the passages that spoke to me. So this one follows young Takako. She's a 25-year-old woman who has, up until this point in her life, has led a very easy life. Her parents are relatively well off. She is educated, she's got a good job, and she has a boyfriend who she adores, until one day her boyfriend tells her, "Oh, I'm getting married next year," to someone else. So Takako is reeling from this breakup, and not only does she lose her boyfriend, but because they work together for reasons, she loses her job. A lot of their friends are his friends, so she finds herself completely alone, and she gets a phone call kind of out of the blue from her uncle Satoru, who runs a bookshop in Jimbocho, which, by the way, you guys, I had to look this up, and I encourage you to do the same. There is, if you don't know, an actual village in Tokyo called Jimbocho, and it is called the Jimbocho Booktown. Look it up. It is a small village that within a 15-minute walk radius, there are 200 used bookstores and curry shops. And this place was immediately added to my bucket list. Now, most of them obviously are going to be filled with Japanese literature. There are a couple of bookshops that have a section, or for some, a whole floor of English books. And really, even if I didn't find an English book, just a whole town with bookshop after bookshop after bookshop. I mean, that's just about the vibe, right? I'm going. Anyways, Uncle Satoru runs the Morisaki bookshop in Jimbocho, and he invites Takako to live in the upstairs apartment of the bookshop and help him run the bookshop. And the story goes from there. This book is broken up into 2 parts, and I will say that the first half I really enjoyed. I loved it. It was very cozy, heartwarming. This is a book about books. You hear about how Takako discovers she loves to read, and she discovers how reading can change your whole outlook. It can fix things sometimes in some ways. The way Takako is characterized, I love how she comes off as a flawed person. She's annoyed by her very kind uncle, but she's really just kind of feeling sorry for herself, which happens. The way her depression is written, I found very accurate, very relatable. And then we get to the second half of the book, and it lost the thread for me, unfortunately. So you find out in the first half that Satoru's kind of going through some stuff of his own, but it doesn't delve too deeply into it. All you know is that his wife left him 5 years before, and he's still carrying a torch for her. In the second half, seemingly out of nowhere, Satoru's wife comes back, and it's all about her. And because she's new in the picture, I found a hard time connecting with her, caring about her, and it was a lot about her. I got bored. I didn't care. I wanted to know how Takako is doing, because there were a couple of things that she set out for herself at the end of the first part, and that's all I wanted to read about in the second part. And ultimately, it kind of circles back around to Takako and how things pan out for her, and how really her and Satoru help each other through their hardships. And that really was heartwarming. And ultimately, I liked this book. I'm glad it was as short as it was. I will, just to add some more positive notes to this, a couple of the passages, this one statement about what it means to read a book, love it, and then connect with another person over a book. We can all really appreciate that, right? I mean, that's the whole reason I enjoy this channel so much, is that I end up having a conversation with so many of you about books that we had similar feelings with. Like my eyes have been on the same book that your eyes have been on, and we connect over that. I love that. So I'm glad I read it. If you like cozy little books about books, give it a shot. Next up is the Kaiju Preservation Society by John Scalzi. This is my first John Scalzi. This is a sci-fi novel. I listened to this one as well, and I would like to be able to say that the audio, the narration is what ruined it for me, but it was, I can tell it was the writing as well. You guys, this had a fantastic premise. We are dealing with a group of scientists who have discovered an alternate dimension. It's Earth, just not our Earth, and they have discovered a portal into that alternate Earth. And who lives in that alternate Earth but the Kaiju? And Kaiju are immense dinosaur-like creatures. Think Godzilla. And these scientists know that these creatures are special, but they know that they're dangerous. So they're over there making sure that they learn as much as they can from them, as well as protect them from humans and protect the humans in our Earth by making sure the Kaiju stay in the alternate Earth. Until, of course, we have the villains who find their way over and discover this alternate Earth and discover the Kaiju and what they're capable of and want to do bad things with them as well as to them at the very potential peril of humanity. Sounds like a good story, right? I was here for it. I was interested. I was expecting kind of a Jurassic Park-ish type story. That is not what I got. First of all, if I didn't mention before, I listened to it and it was narrated by Will Wheaton. From what I understand, I think he has some kind of cult following, but I think there's also a large population in that whole cultish society that really hate him. But I can only speak about what I experienced with his narration of this book. His tone and inflection was way over the top. And also somehow he came across as smug. That was so annoying. But because I was so intrigued with the story, I put it aside as much as I could. Very difficult through most of it. But in his defense, the way the characters were written, we're talking about a bunch of scientists, with the exception of our main character, Jamie, who isn't a scientist. He's kind of hired on by an acquaintance. And let me just say really quickly, you're following Jamie. It's the beginning of the pandemic. He's lost his job and he is working as a food delivery guy, and he runs into an old school acquaintance. And they get to talking, and this school acquaintance works for the Kaiju Preservation Society, and they're in need of kind of a layman type person to do some of the heavy lifting. And the story goes from there. And so you meet all of these scientists, and you think you're dealing with serious folks, right? But every single one of them are snarky, sarcastic, constantly cracking a joke. I mean, it's constant. That's all they do when they're talking about anything, really, to the point that they were kind of hard to distinguish from each other. I want to say you had like 5 different sciences represented, and they all meshed kind of into the same person. So the characters were not, I feel, very well developed. I think the snarkiness would have been more entertaining if it was just coming from Jamie, the non-scientist in the group. He started off as funny and entertaining, and then it just got to be too much because everybody kind of talked in that same tone. And then even Jamie's level of snarkiness got to be too much. I mean, as he's being introduced to this alternate universe and these creatures that he's only seen in Godzilla movies, and the only thing he can think to say is, "What?" I mean, repeatedly. Like, I don't, and there's a lot of sciencey jargon that is written kind of in a science for dummies way. Don't treat me like a dummy, okay? And then I feel like a lot of the author's personal politics was kind of snuck in there. By snuck, I mean smacked in the face. Politics about gender identity, politics about the pandemic and vaccinations, stuff like that. That just kind of put a bad taste in my mouth. And then to top it all off, there's an author's note at the end where he basically defends writing this crappy novel. And I only put it like that because he's basically saying, yeah, this book is crap because I wrote it in 2020 and it was kind of a bad year for me. And my response to that was, hey buddy, it was a bad year for a lot of people. I don't know. I just think that this story had so much potential and it really let me down on so many levels. Next up is Shotgun Lovesongs by Nicholas Butler. This book was sent to me by a subscriber, Lorraine. Thank you so much. I sent you an email. I hope you got it. This was such a lovely surprise. You know, getting book mail is already such a treat, but getting a gift like this from one of you, it gave me all the feels. So thank you so much, Lorraine. I had this on my TBR already because, Lorraine, you had recommended it to me, gosh, months and months ago. And of course, when you get a gift like this, I decided to read it immediately. This is contemporary literary fiction. I would classify this as dudelit, kind of the other side of the coin as chicklit. You're following four men, and they are friends with each other ever since they were kids in a small Wisconsin town. It's been 15 years since high school graduation, and you're reading about how each of their individual lives have changed and how their relationships to each other have changed. You have Henry, who is a farmer who has stayed in the small town that he was born in. You have Lee, who has left the town and become kind of a rock star. You have Ronnie, who has left the town and became a successful rodeo star, but ultimately ended up back in the small town. And then you have Kip, who became a successful businessman and has ended up back in the small town as well. When I first started reading this book, I wasn't sure I was going to like it. It's got a little bit of a slow start. Not really much in the way of plot or story is happening. You're really learning about the characters. And a fifth character also is Henry's wife, Beth, because Beth also kind of grew up with the four other main characters. But as I got to know the characters, I got kind of pulled in. I connected with them. I cared about them. The characters are very well developed. And even though not much is really going on, I wanted to know what was going to happen in their respective lives. I will say that in the last third of the book, there were a couple of scenes that took me by surprise and made me kind of sit up straight in my seat. So it ended up being a little bit more than I expected, so I'm really happy about that. But ultimately, when I finished the book, this book is about friendship. It's about loyalty, what we do for the people we love, the compromises we make as we get older. It's about wanting what we don't have and appreciating what we do have. It's about the grass never being greener on the other side. It had some good messages, and I did enjoy this book. The author did a really good job of describing the small town and Midwestern life. Ultimately, this was a sentimental story. It was a sweet story, and I enjoyed it. So Lorraine, thank you so very much. Okay, this next book, try not to be put off by the title because it is a little off-putting. The next book I read was Ejaculate Responsibly by Gabrielle Stanley Blair. This one I came across because I've sold several copies of it at the bookstore that I work at, and I was intrigued. So just a little bit of history about this. This is an essay that stemmed from a extensive Twitter thread, and I don't really know a whole lot about Twitter because I don't tweet. But anyways, it started off as a tweet, and then she turned it into this published essay. The author herself, she runs an online blog called Design Mom. So a blog that really kind of gives how-to advice about having and raising kids. Oh, and let me give you the full title of the book, A Whole New Way to Think About Abortion. I also listened to this, and it was narrated by the author, and I absolutely was riveted. Her bottom line is that men cause all unwanted pregnancies. Yeah, let me say that again. Men cause all unwanted pregnancies. And the structure of the book is she has 25 points that she elaborates on to support that statement. All the questions that are coming up in your head right now, or even coming out of your mouth, and all the arguments that you would immediately have when she makes that statement, she addresses. And I feel she addresses them quite well. When I first started listening to the book, she introduces herself as a Mormon mom of 6. And immediately I thought to myself, do I really want to hear this argument coming from A, a Mormon, and B, a woman with 6 kids? No shade on anybody who identifies with either one of those groups. I'm just saying, for this particular argument, usually it's not coming from a Mormon mom. But man, she makes some incredible arguments here. This book is super smart, got some great points to it, and stuff that we just don't normally talk about that we absolutely should be talking about. And let me just be clear about something else. This book is not about whether abortion is either right or wrong. This is a book that talks about all the ways that we could be preventing unwanted pregnancies. This is also not a man-hating book, because one of the points that she makes that was kind of an aha moment for me is we as women, we take on that burden of birth control, don't we? And she brings up the point that we all, men and women, have like a huge blind spot when it comes to pregnancy prevention, that it's just the woman's responsibility. Men assume women will take on the burden of preventing pregnancy, but women assume women will do it as well. The bottom line of this book and all the arguments that are made in it relate to the very flawed fact of reality that the burden of preventing unwanted pregnancies is put on the woman who's only fertile about 24 hours out of every month, and only for a relatively small portion of her life, versus putting it on the man who is fertile 24 hours of every day of his life. Now, to be fair, there was one section, it was towards the end, and she actually says this, that sperm is dangerous. It goes a little bit off the rails there, but she does kind of support that statement. I just don't think she should have used that specific statement because it just sounds silly. But other than that, this book really is just chock full of valid points. She supports it all with just plain good sense. I highly recommend this to anybody and everybody. To be perfectly honest, I think it should be required reading at school. I fully believe in time, probably a lot of time, that this book will be kind of a movement towards putting the burden of pregnancy prevention on men, certainly a lot more than it is now. I know, bold statement, right? But it's just that important. Please read this book, regardless of your political views or your personal views about pregnancy, abortion, birth control, any of that. Because one thing I think we can all agree on is this world could stand a lot less unwanted pregnancies. Oh my gosh, let's lighten it up, shall we? Next, I read The Cruelest Month by Louise Penny. This is the third in the Armand Gamache series. I am still enjoying this series. This one happens around Easter time. The local folks that, if you're reading the series, you're already familiar with, decide just for fun to invite a psychic who has come to town to lead a séance. And they have this séance and someone ends up dying of fright during the séance. But of course, Armand Gamache sees it differently, and we discover that it was actually murder, and the story goes from there. So was this my favorite so far of the three that I've read? No, it wasn't, but I still enjoyed it. The thing that I had a hard time with is there is an ongoing story that's happening in the background of each individual mystery as the series goes on. There are people that work in the police force that Armand is a part of that want Armand out. And there is this kind of conspiracy that is happening within the department. And I feel like that particular story needs to be resolved. I think that it's kind of being drawn out a little bit too much for me. I just started to lose my patience a little bit. However, there was something new that came up in this particular book. And if you've read it, you know, it's a lovely little twist that I enjoyed at the end, and I'm really interested to see where that goes from here. I feel like I'm being so cryptic right now because I don't want to give any spoilers. But the bottom line is I still enjoyed this. I am looking forward to the fourth in the series. The mystery of it was okay, and where it ended up going was okay. What I liked more about was kind of the message of that story. That kind of reminds me of another part that it was enjoyable to read, and it has to do with one of my favorite regular characters, and that's Ruth Zardo. She's foul-mouthed and she's just hilarious. I love her. She is taking care of these two goslings. She finds these eggs and they hatch and she's taking care of them. One of the eggs, she actually helped the gosling kind of break out of its shell. Turns out you're really not supposed to do that. As much as you want to help this, a helpless creature could ultimately in the long run not be a great help. And how that little incident related to the story as a whole, that you can love too much, that you can love too well, I thought was really brilliantly written, and just another reason why I am really enjoying the series and this writer. The way she ties in the stories of the regular characters that show up in each of the books just allows you to get to know these people on a deeper level, which just adds to the enjoyment of the book. I'll be reading the 4th one, and I'm super excited that I still have at least 15 left. Okay, last but not least, the book I want to talk to you about is The Fairytale Life of Dorothy Gale by Virginia Cantra. I have a couple of fun anecdotes about this book. So this book was actually just published in December, and I featured it in my video, new releases that I'm excited about for December, but I ended up getting my hands on it in another way that I'm so happy to share with you. My husband, for Christmas, got me I guess you call them a book club box. There's a bunch of them out there, but my husband got me a 3-month subscription to a box called Once Upon a Book Club, I think. Yeah, Once Upon a Book Club. And in it, you get a book that is, of course, a surprise to you. And then you get 3 or 4 little prezzies individually wrapped in the box that you're not supposed to open until a particular page. So you don't open the presents until you get to that particular part in the book. So it was super fun to read this book. So as an example, we have 2 characters who are baking in a kitchen. There's a reference to a kitchen towel, and there's a sticky on the page that says, "Open your gift." In it was a kitchen towel that was in the fabric of yellow brick, and it had the quote, "There's no place like home." Super cute. I'm working on a video for my Instagram to kind of share each particular gift, just to tell people about this book box that was just so much fun. But let's talk about the book. So super cute. It is marketed as a romance. It's not a romance. I mean, is there a romance in here? Yes, but that's not what this book is about. If you can't tell, this is a modern retelling of The Wizard of Oz, but don't be mistaken, this is also a story that just stands on its own. You're following Dorothy Gale, but she goes by Dee. She has suffered a humiliating heartbreak while she is at graduate school in Kansas, of course. And she basically ends up running away to Ireland to complete her graduate study there. Of course, she went to Ireland, the Emerald Isle. But anyways, there she kind of starts anew, and she meets some people, some friends, 3 in particular that all have not only physical attributes, but personality characters that are similar to a certain Tin Man, Scarecrow, and Cowardly Lion. This is just the story of Dee finding her way in life, her finding her power and discovering that what she wants out of life, what she needs out of life, what she deserves is entirely up to her. This is about how finding where you belong in your life in this world sometimes requires stepping out of your comfort zone. More often than not, I would say. I really did enjoy this story. I really enjoyed Dee as a character. She's not written like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. I mean, there's a little bit more depth to her character. She's not perfect. The side characters are lovely. They're all very well developed. I felt like Dublin, Ireland was another character in this book. The descriptions really captured the beauty of Dublin, the beauty and charm of Ireland. And this was just a fun read. It was such a great way, I think, to start off a new year. It was fresh, but also cozy and nostalgic at the same time. I would definitely recommend this book, especially if you love The Wizard of Oz. All the references were incredibly clever, but none of them were gratuitous. And if you've never had a book box before, I would recommend Once Upon a Book Club because it is a super cute box. So far, so good because this was a fun read. So that is it. Those are the books that I read in the first half of January. Have you read any of these books? What books did you decide to start off the new year with? I would love to hear about it. Or you could just say hi down in the doodly-doo. If you're still watching at this point, please consider giving that like button a boop, and a subscribe would be wonderful. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.